and what projects they prefer to participate in, and their participation. So this study is about understanding which particular characteristics relate to their participation and whether their motivation relates to their participation as well. To do that, we recruited young people via Zooniverse newsletters. So we gained access to the logged activities of 242 young participants, and we received 64 survey responses. For 62 participants, we had access in both their logged activities and their survey responses. So as you can see on the right side table, some demographics. Many of our participants were female, but we are still not sure whether this happens because Zooniverse attracts loads of female young people or because they were more happy to contribute to our research. And also, as you can see, the majority of our participants were 16 to 19 years old, which again reminds us of how difficult it is to receive consents for young people under 16 to participate in this kind of study. So what we did is that we used the logged activities of young people to calculate the proportion of active days they had on the platform, the period of time they remained linked to Zooniverse as active members, the daily duration they spent on tasks, how systematic they were, and their average daily project and contribution. Also, we received some we got access to some of their characteristics by asking them in the survey their gender, age, their parental occupation, whether they participate in any other online STEM-related activities. And we also asked them about other characteristics, such as their confidence in using Zooniverse, which kind of device they use to participate in Zooniverse projects, and what project types they participated in. And finally, we also asked them about their motivation in a closed-ended question that had some responses such as my motivation was relevant to school activities or out of school activities of my parents was my motivation, and they also had the option to add their own motivations. So to answer our research questions, we explore the relationship between the left side metrics and the right side variables by using non-parametrical tests. So first we looked at which of their characteristics relate to their participation and contribution. So the results show that young people who are very confident in using Zooniverse tend to remain on the platform for a longer duration. But young people who are confident in using Zooniverse tend to spend more time on tasks than those who are very confident. Then we also saw that young people who are using smartphone only to participate in Zooniverse, they have a larger proportion of active days than those using all three devices, a computer, a laptop, and a smartphone. And also young people who use a computer or laptop tend to remain on Zooniverse for a longer duration than those using a smartphone only. As we can see from these characteristics, the only significant ones, because we are only reporting the significant ones, were the confidence in using Zooniverse and the technologies they have used to participate in Zooniverse. So none of the other characteristics was related to participation or contribution. And I'm referring to gender, age, parental occupation, whether they are participating in other STEM-related activities, and the project type they participate in. And then we looked at at whether motivation relates to participation and contribution. And the results showed that young people whose motivation was relevant to school activities had more systematic participation than those without this motivation. And then that young people whose motivation to participate was their parents, were less systematic than those without this motivation. So again, the only two motivations that were significant was relevant to school activities and parents. And at the same time, if you see all the participation and contribution metrics, the only metric that was related to motivation was how systematic they were, the contribution periodicity. So motivation has not influenced at any way how active they were, how long they remained on the platform, how long they spent on tasks, and their contribution rates. So based on our results, we are trying to draw some conclusions, as this is an ongoing study and we will really appreciate your feedback as well. So we saw that confidence is quite significant for young people to remain linked to the platform for a longer duration of time as active members. So we are interested to understand how to make users more confident in using the platform. And we have already conducted some interviews and surveys asking young people on what they liked and what they did not like on the platform. And we are planning to draw some design recommendations and try to improve the platform so that it's better, it's more usable for young people and more engaging. And then we saw that technology is a big factor as well, especially smartphones that are related to a larger proportion of active days. So based on that, we can suggest the design of Zooniverse project to be more mobile friendly and provide mobile friendly interface so that people will be able to access the project via their mobile phones and have more active days on the project. And then, of course, looking at the shorter duration in many occasions, we would like to understand what makes young people drop out the Zooniverse in general, or a Zooniverse project in particular. So again, we conducted some interviews with them and asked them what they liked or they did not like, or they would like to change on the platform. And we hope that based on that, we can suggest some incentives for promoting longer participation on the platform. And finally, considering that school activities promoted a more systematic participation in young participants, we may suggest the collaboration and public engage activities, the promotion of collaboration and public engage activities with schools, if this is going to be an idea that will promote and engage more young people in taking part in Zooniverse or in general other citizen science activities. So thank you. If you have any questions or comments or even suggestions, we will be more than happy to discuss this with you, since this is an ongoing project and we are still trying to do better. Mark, I can't hear you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for your presentation. Do we have any questions? That's really fascinating. I'm particularly interested in your reflection about mobile learning, and I should imagine with kind of lockdown situation many places are in, many people might be using mobile devices like smartphones more than desktop devices and laptops these days.
Yes, to be honest, in a previous study, we also noticed the same. So it was a study with Enquire, and we showed Enquire to young people, and without telling them which device they should be using, they all used their mobile devices while they had a laptop in front of them. So I suppose that mobile devices is a thing for younger people in particular.
Yeah, indeed, and I should imagine in different parts of the world as well, it might be that mobiles might be the first device of choice. So, does anybody have any questions? We've got a few minutes left for questions. Raise your hand or type in the chat window.
I was just expecting a question from Mike.
I think Eileen's hand is up. I don't know if you can see it.
I have the terrible habit of leaving my hand up instead of bringing it down. Sorry about that.
No worries.
I see Mike is typing, so maybe Mike has a question.
Wow, and I'm not sure I know the answer to that. So Mike is asking how many Zooniverse projects require desktop-sized screens. And
well, perhaps so.
Yeah.
Can I say something here, Maria? Perhaps we could say that they, till recently, they didn't have a mobile-friendly version of Zooniverse. So it was designed, the software Zooniverse was designed for use on a computer. Recently, like the last 1 or 2 years, they have designed a simple version of Zooniverse where you can swap through images and say yes or no. So I would say that at the moment, maybe most of the projects are desktop-based, given that, although there are efforts to design something that is mobile-friendly.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of requests for that as well. At least the interviews I have conducted by now, people were asking whether this is going to happen, since they prefer to use their tablets to participate in Zooniverse rather than sitting in front of their desktop.
And as Tina said, from the interviews we did, the young people are not very happy or satisfied with the current version of the mobile app Zooniverse has.
What I was impressed by was that after looking at all these variables, the main variables that were related to participation were technology related as well, like their confidence in using Zooniverse, which is a technology, and what kind of technologies they used, not their demographics or their background or any other variable.
Well, I think Mike's typing again.
What I was wanting to ask is there a conflict between what young users prefer and what's possible? I think it has to do more with the type of project and the type of activity as well. Yeah, so in some cases it's difficult to like draw or classify or transcribe when it's mobile, when it's a mobile version. But it has happened in some projects. I suppose it's also relevant to the resources they have to build the project and how much time they have to spend, because they are also funded. And
Perhaps we should also add here that the other thing that is coming from the study is that they tend to participate in projects that are easy to take part in. So what is asked is relatively easy and straightforward. So this is maybe another factor to consider when you design projects for young people. But overall, it's a relatively new area, and we don't really know much about what citizen science looks like for young people. And of course, by young people, in this project, we focus on a range of ages from 5 to 19 years old, and there is a great variation there as to what we are designing and for which specific ages. In Zooniverse, we talk mostly about 16 to 19 years old. So these happen to be their requirement, but maybe younger children of, let's say, 10 years old may be looking for something different.
Yeah, at least a couple of interviews we've had with younger children. They prefer the pictures, the projects that you just have to tag the picture, like spot the animal or spot the penguin.
Right, thank you.
Just a comment from Tina that just to say that Tina
Thank you.
covered Maria when she was on maternity, so she knows a lot about the project. And she says that it seems that young people were asking for help and support when they were doing the activities. And I would say that this is not new because, I mean, from research I've done around mobile applications for children, it seems that most of them are not really well designed to support the children recover from mistakes and carry on without the help from an adult. So I guess it's something that Zooniverse developers should consider if they are aiming to engage with younger audiences.
Yeah, and we're actually tried some embodiments related to that to give them some more detailed instructions on how to complete the tasks, but we never finished with those embodiments, so we don't know the result.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Maria and Thea, for a great presentation. Perhaps we could show our appreciation. And over to Paul Mulholland, who will now talk about a project he's working on. So over to you, Paul.
All right, thanks, Mark. Am I audible and visible?
You are indeed very visible from your wonderful home office, Paul.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So what I'd like to talk to you today is this idea of citizen curation and enabling multiple voices within the museum. Now, museums traditionally were there to provide a single authoritative account of art and history through their collections. But this started to change. A lot of museums are starting to look at how can we present multiple voices and perspectives around our objects that the visitor might have to negotiate, and also looking at how the visitors themselves could contribute some of these voices. I think one of the most influential exhibitions in this area of looking at voices was Fred Wilson's Mining the Museum exhibition in 1992. And he worked with a museum that used objects to tell the story of Maryland. And it was largely the story of old white men. And he kind of went there, he took kind of objects that had been in storage and kind of reconfigured the museum space to tell another story. So, for example, the image there is one of the rooms that was in the museum, and it used to have 3 pedestals with a kind of bust or statue of some kind of famous old white guy who'd never lived there. And he changed that. He moved them to one side and put in 3 other pedestals of African Americans who lived and worked in Maryland and had an important influence on the development of Maryland. That those 3 pedestals were empty because no one had ever made a bust or statue of them. And obviously this resonates with some discussions going on at the moment about who deserves a statue, where should it be put, and who decides. If you want to open the museum up and accommodate multiple voices, there are certain challenges. So one, people often find it hard to kind of find their voice and offer their opinion or interpretation of an artwork. I think we've all had that experience of going into a gallery and the first thing we look at isn't the artwork, it's the small box of text next to it telling you what it's about. And even if you can take an artwork and surround it with multiple voices and opinions, how do we help people to engage with those and not just to gravitate to the few opinions made by people like me who think like I do? And also a big problem with museum participation activities, there tends to be very low representation from, for example, the BAME community, older people and people with disabilities, and that probably we need these voices more than any others. And there are also certain technological challenges. Museum systems and metadata schemes are designed for artifacts to have a single objective description about them. They're not built to have multiple opinions about things. So museums often have to turn to social media when they want to do this kind of thing. But it's often particularly frightening for the museum to share items from their collections through social media, and they have very little control over where they go and what happens to them. And also social media algorithms aren't particularly helpful if you're trying to broaden perspectives and help people to see multiple points of view. Social media algorithms are often about more of the same. So within the context of this, we just started a new project called SPICE, which is funded under H2020, just started in May, and it's a consortium of 4 museums, 3 tech companies and 8 universities, coordinated by Bologna and CNR in Italy. And what we're trying to develop is tools and methods for something we've called citizen curation. So what we want is citizens to be able to look at artifacts and offer their own interpretation, whether that be as a story, building a collection, building an exhibition. And then what we want to do is aggregate those interpretations, so allow people to reflect on them, look at the similarities and differences and perspectives within and across different groups. This idea was influenced by an exhibition by Grayson Perry just after the EU referendum. He crowdsourced over social media images from people who voted Leave and Remain as to what they thought Britain was about. And he took those images and turned them into Leave and Remain pots, the Remain pot just being a little bit bigger. And then what was interesting is he had a kind of exhibition where he launched these, and he invited the people who contributed the images to come to that launch. And it was kind of quite interesting looking at how they reacted. One, they spent a lot of time talking about how similar they were. And it was quite interesting how positive the dialogue was. They were pointing at the vases rather than each other. And I think that's the kind of process that we would like to create. So citizen curation is about giving curatorial methods to citizens in the same way that citizen science gave citizens the scientific method. Enable people to participate in curatorial activities. We want to be inclusive and open to different groups. And we'd like to promote kind of empathy and social cohesion, sort of people looking across, seeing other points of view, and almost use it as almost like a kind of lab for doing psychological studies, a museum being able to find out how can my artifacts help people to think in different ways. So there's basically 6 things we're working on in the project. We're just starting. So the first thing we've got to tackle is developing the methods by which people can interpret objects and reflect on them. So we're setting up various workshops where people just work on paper and come up with methods. At the moment, we're working out how we're going to kick that off in our current situation, because we had in mind face-to-face workshops. So looking at how people can do things like storytelling, collecting, analyzing artifacts, can we embed things into puzzles? And then how can we visualize the aggregated interpretations back and get beyond showing averages? If you show averages, then people focus on differences, and we want people to look at the similarities. Secondly is, how do we recommend new content to people? If somebody's looking at an artwork or they've submitted a story, how do we recommend what they might look at next? And we want to take an approach that's very different to that's used in social media. So if you think about social media, they're building a model about you and they hide it. We want models to be transparent so people can understand how they are seen. Social media is about finding differences between groups so you can target them with different content that will make them click. We want to show differences within a group of people who might think themselves as homogenous, and actually they've got different points of view. Social media is about similarity between content. You like this, here's more things that are similar. What we want to investigate is to show people similarities between different groups, and they might be more similar than they imagine. And also, rather than drive content clicking based on popularity, to encourage variety. And then in order to make this work, we need a kind of underlying technology. Things like Facebook, you've got some kind of centralized system to which everybody is contributing. What we want to build for the data sharing and storage is a kind of distributed set of nodes that can share data with each other. So this means any contributor, a museum, or a citizen can maintain control over their own data. They can withdraw access at any time. It allows the museum to track how their data is reused. So if there's rights attached with an object, those rights go with the object, and they can make sure they're followed. And software to allow people to link and discover through that network, to find other things, perhaps other ways of looking at the same objects. And then we need to kind of form these into interfaces that people can use. We have two companies involved that make kind of kiosks and mobile interfaces for museums, who are going to be leading on the interface development. So to build things like storytelling apps or treasure hunts or tagging and different types of visualization. And very important to us is that accessibility is built into everything. Because we want these wide range of voices, so everything text to speech or magnification or audio descriptions. And then underneath, there's some kind of there's work to do on a kind of database level to make it all work. As I said, museums assume that an object has a single description. That's how their databases and systems work. So what we're doing is developing a kind of new metadata scheme for museum objects, where it's not just an object having a single truth, but an object having multiple opinions, and then using that to show alternative perspectives. And one here, if there are any personal inquiry veterans listening, we want to make use of something a bit like a script, so we can change the order of activities and see what effect that has. So if you offer your opinion before or after you've seen what other people think, how does that change your opinion? And then we're going to kind of realize these through a set of case studies. And very important to us is that the case studies run for the whole length of the project. They're not just receiving something that we come up with. They're involved in the co-design process. In Finland, the Design Museum Helsinki are interested in engaging older people with their collection. Now, if you've been to Finland, you might know that it has a certain style of design. There's a certain personality of how things are designed in Finland. And they want to develop ways of engaging older people by looking at the things that might be in their drawer at home and how they reflect design principles that are found in objects in the museum, and kind of making those connections and sharing them across generations. At the OU, we'll be working particularly with the Irish Museum of Modern Art, and they want to focus on people who can't usually visit the museum physically. So they work a lot with asylum seekers and also children with serious illnesses. And one thing we want to look at is kind of connection points. So one thing we're looking at is kind of universal kind of events that affect everybody, such as birth and death and marriage and coming of age. That these are kind of quite universal across different cultures. And we're going to kind of develop tools that allow those to be kind of shared across different communities. And we expect people will find them a lot similar than you might imagine. Within Spain, we're working with the Natural History Museum, and they're looking at kind of opinions basically around the environment and kind of similarities and differences of opinion. Within Italy, we're working with the Modern Art Museum in Turin, and they're particularly interested in people who are deaf and develop storytelling apps that they can use to build their interpretations. Now, one particular idea they have is that, say, people who are deaf, more of their attention is focused on the visual domain. And they have a kind of hypothesis that deaf people often see things in visual artworks that hearing people miss. So they want to develop apps that allow deaf people to kind of share stories, and then hearing people can access those stories to find out what they've been missing. And then our final study is with the Hex Museum in Israel, and they want to use kind of museum objects, particularly historical objects, to provoke opinions and discussions across different religious and secular communities, and kind of compare similarities and differences in opinion. So in summary, we're working on this idea of citizen curation as bringing curatorial methods to citizens. And we want it to be inclusive. We want to enable multiple voices, promote active participation, and we're particularly interested in how can we promote empathy, social cohesion, or taking different perspectives. We've only just started, so we don't even have a website yet, but contact me if you'd like more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That was a fantastic talk. And as you say, it's a very timely talk, given the position we are in both with Brexit, and also thinking about the challenges of how we reach across cultures when we're physically separated. I wonder if we have some questions from the audience. Eileen, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Great talk, really interesting, Paul. And you referred back to personal inquiry and, you know, our idea that people can have inquiries that lead to learning. So you gave a great, such a wide project with all these different museums, and I think you made a great argument for augmentation of the normal museum space and the role that curation might have for reflecting, helping people to reflect on the history and the culture and hear other voices. I wondered whether you would push as far as by doing these things, people will learn. I'm trying to make the link back to what Thea and Maria were talking about, whether in engaging, and maybe crowdsourcing is the wrong word, but bringing people together to think about what is there and how it can be represented. Whether you would in this project or in any other want to push it as far as seeing what changes there were, either. I mean, I'm assuming when you talk about promoting active participation and empathy and social cohesion, you'll be looking for changes in viewpoints. Do you think this kind of approach could be used to develop learning from museum art?
Yes, I mean, we're developing the sort of evaluation protocol at the moment, and the main kind of measures that we're looking at is measures around kind of empathy and perspective taking and kind of understanding of alternative points of view. And I think that the hope is that, you know, the museum could provide an environment where somebody could perhaps reflect on their own beliefs and perhaps their own biases, and be able to do that in a kind of another place that you know, that there's not kind of just a normal day-to-day setting. So we'd hope that people can broaden their perspectives, perhaps become more empathetic. There are ways of measuring that, and then hopefully there'd be some sort of transfer there. So kind of what that kind of change in perspective or that change in thought might be something that they can kind of take with them and might have some effect on them later. I think we've seen, you know, with people like Folk and Deakin, you know, a visit to a museum might affect you months, years later. You know, there can be some kind of reverberation. So what we'd hope is that it might kind of plant some seeds, kind of change somebody's point of view, and that might somehow impact on their kind of day-to-day life sometime later.
Thank you, Paul. Tina, I don't know if you noticed the chat window, Paul, but Tina's asked a couple of interesting questions for you.
Yeah, so I think empathy, there are scales out there that can be used to measure empathy, and that there's been a number of studies looking at, for example, bringing together different communities, engaging them in some activity, and seeing how that changes the kind of level of empathy or level of understanding. You're right. I think social cohesion is much broader. I think it was kind of framed as basically for social cohesion you need empathy, and I think we're kind of focusing on empathy as something kind of more measurable and immediate, and probably social cohesion might be more of a kind of indirect consequence. But I think the things we're trying to measure more is kind of understanding of other points of view, perhaps other cultures, and measures of empathy.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Very well.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Paul. This is Tina.
Hi.
Actually, I just wanted to point you to some reference I read last month. It all goes back to it's not about empathy, but it's about emotional intelligence, and you might be interested in that. Perhaps it's called the method, the approach is called Ruler, and it's by Mark Brackett, and she's at Yale University.
No, that sounds very relevant. Could you kind of send me a link?
Sure.
Or a description of that?
Ruler stands for recognizing, understanding, labeling, expressing, and regulating emotions and feelings. I'm going to send you the link.
Yes. I think that's not something that. Well, I mean, I think it's very relevant to what we're doing, because you know, the way people think about their in-group and other groups is very much influenced by emotion, and often in negative ways. And often people don't realize how much, say, the emotion is kind of clouding or influencing their thinking. But you know, I think perhaps to some extent, empathy probably requires some kind of emotional intelligence. So it would be really interesting to look at that. Thanks.
No problem. It was one of the most interesting books I read during the quarantine, actually, and I think we all need that. So I'm going to share the link right away.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tina. I wonder if there are any other questions. We'll wait for just a couple of seconds to see if anybody else has any other questions. Perhaps we'd like to thank Paul and Thea and Maria for their presentations. We've had two speakers today, so we have an extended tea break. We'll just keep an eye on to see if anybody's got any other questions, but just for your information, we will reconvene at 15:45 for the panel session, which will be hosted by Mark. We've got a very interesting panel discussion on presence and eventedness. Panel discussants are Dave Cormier from Canada, Dave White from the University of Arts London, Amber Thomas, University of Warwick, Sheila McNeil, independent consultant, and Roger Emery from Solent University. So we'll be joining those at 15:45 BST. So that's about 40 minutes. So I'm keeping an eye. I can't see any other questions coming. So thanks again to our speakers in this session. And we'll keep this chat space open, so you're welcome to keep chatting here. Or please go over to the Teams area to look at the posters and the social chats there. Otherwise, stretch your legs, get a cup of tea. Thank you again, presenters, and we look forward to seeing you at 15:45. So thank you very much.